In the 17th century, amidst the swirling political tides of Central Africa, a remarkable woman emerged who would forever shape the course of history. This woman was Queen Nzinga Mbande, the leader of the kingdoms of Ndongo and Matamba in present-day Angola. Her reign, marked by political savvy, military prowess, and a fierce determination to preserve her people's sovereignty, became one of the most significant moments of resistance against Portuguese colonization in Africa. Nzinga's legacy is one of resilience, intelligence, and a remarkable capacity to challenge the dominance of foreign powers. Nzinga was born in the early 1580s, likely around 1583, in the Kingdom of Ndongo. The Ndongo Kingdom was located in the region that would later become Angola, which at the time was a strategic point for Portuguese trade and influence. The Portuguese had been active along the West African coast since the late 15th century, initially focused on trade, particularly in slaves, but gradually extending their influence inland. By the time Nzinga came of age, Portuguese colonial ambitions had grown more aggressive, and their interference in the affairs of local kingdoms was a constant threat. She was born into a royal family. Her father, King Queen Samba, ruled Ndongo, and her mother was likely from the royal family of Matamba, another key African kingdom. Her background, steeped in royalty, placed her in a unique position to influence the political future of the region. While her path to the throne was not certain, her intelligence and political abilities became evident from an early age. She was not only a princess, but also a trained diplomat, skilled in the intricacies of negotiations and statecraft. Nzinga's early life was marked by the ever-present tension between African kingdoms and Portuguese colonial powers. The Portuguese were heavily involved in the transatlantic slave trade, and they sought to establish dominance in the region by controlling key trading routes and extracting resources. Their growing encroachment into the interior led to increased conflict, and Nzinga's eventual leadership would be shaped by these external pressures. Despite being a woman in a deeply patriarchal society, Nzinga's sharp mind, strategic thinking, and eloquence in communication allowed her to rise above the gender limitations of the time. Her first encounter with the Portuguese came in 1622 when her brother, King Nzinga Mbande of Ndongo, attempted to negotiate a peace settlement with the Portuguese, who had been encroaching on his kingdom. Nzinga accompanied her brother to the negotiations. When the Portuguese ambassador, João Correia de Souza, arrived, he insisted that she sit on the floor, a sign of disrespect to the royal princess. Calm and composed, Nzinga responded by ordering one of her servants to kneel so that she could sit on him as a chair, demonstrating her strength and her refusal to be humiliated. This moment became a symbol of her resilience and intelligence, and it would be remembered as one of her most defining acts. During the meeting, Nzinga showed her diplomatic prowess. She engaged in negotiations with the Portuguese on behalf of her brother, displaying a combination of tact, cunning, and negotiation skills. She argued for her kingdom's interests and cleverly maneuvered to secure a treaty that would grant some degree of autonomy to Ndongo, though the terms were far from favorable. Her participation in the negotiations marked the beginning of her career as a leader capable of both diplomacy and warfare. However, the treaty that Nzinga negotiated with the Portuguese was short-lived. Within a few years, the Portuguese once again violated the terms of the agreement, continuing their expansion and exploiting local populations. This betrayal left Nzinga with little choice but to abandon diplomacy in favor of military action. After the death of her brother, King Nzinga Mbande, in 1624, Nzinga assumed leadership of Ndongo, though her path was not without obstacles. Her ascension to the throne was challenged by internal dissent and external pressures, but her leadership qualities would soon prove invaluable. Nzinga's response to Portuguese aggression was swift and forceful. Rather than accepting subjugation, she rallied her forces and sought to unite neighboring kingdoms against the Portuguese threat. She forged a strategic alliance with the Kingdom of Matamba, led by Queen Nzinga, a neighboring ruler who shared Nzinga's desire for independence from Portuguese control. Together, they would form a formidable opposition to Portuguese colonial ambitions. Matamba, though not as large as Ndongo, was strategically important in the region, and the alliance between Nzinga and Ana provided a strong counterbalance to Portuguese power. Nzinga's political acumen came to the forefront as she deftly navigated the complexities of this alliance, ensuring that her interests and the interests of her people remained central to the negotiations. With Matamba as an ally, Nzinga was able to expand her military forces and engage the Portuguese on multiple fronts. The Portuguese, recognizing the growing threat of Nzinga's united front, launched a series of military campaigns aimed at subduing her forces. However, Nzinga's military strategy was highly effective, and she quickly became known for her use of guerrilla tactics and ambushes. Her knowledge of the local terrain allowed her to outmaneuver the better-equipped Portuguese forces. Her military campaigns were marked by both surprise attacks and careful planning, which kept the Portuguese on edge and forced them to stretch their resources thin. Nzinga's personal involvement in the battles further solidified her reputation as a determined and fearless leader. She often fought alongside her soldiers, inspiring them with her courage and determination. Her leadership was not merely about military strategy, but also about morale. Her people saw her as a protector of their land, their culture, and their freedom, and this sense of loyalty made her forces even more effective in battle. Despite the Portuguese's superior weaponry, Nzinga's forces won several key battles. However, the prolonged conflict, which included both military skirmishes and diplomatic negotiations, strained her kingdom. Recognizing that a protracted war could lead to the eventual destruction of her people, Nzinga turned to diplomacy once more, this time seeking to forge alliances with European powers that were rivals of Portugal. She established a relationship with the Dutch, who were engaged in their own conflict with the Portuguese, and secured military support from them in exchange for trade privileges. This alliance with the Dutch provided Nzinga with the military edge she needed to continue her resistance against Portuguese forces. Armed with better weaponry and additional manpower, she managed to hold her ground and even scored victories that forced the Portuguese to reconsider their approach. Nzinga's ability to balance diplomacy with military action made her a force to be reckoned with. She did not merely resist colonialism through violence. She used the full range of tools at her disposal, from alliances to strategic warfare. Despite these successes, the Portuguese remained determined to regain control over Angola. By the mid-1650s, after decades of resistance, both sides were exhausted by the prolonged conflict. Recognizing that a negotiated settlement might be the only path forward to secure her kingdom's future, Nzinga agreed to engage in peace talks with the Portuguese once more. In 1657, a peace treaty was signed between Nzinga and the Portuguese, which granted her certain concessions and allowed her to maintain a degree of sovereignty over Ndongo and Matamba. Though the treaty did not completely rid the region of Portuguese influence, it was a testament to Nzinga's resilience and diplomatic skill. She had managed to secure a peace that allowed her people to survive and thrive despite centuries of external aggression. The peace treaty marked the end of Nzinga's active military campaigns, but her work was far from finished. She continued to rule with wisdom and foresight, ensuring that her people's autonomy was preserved in a time when colonial powers were intent on subjugating Africa. Nzinga's reign was a beacon of African resistance against European colonialism. Her strength and determination to protect her people became legendary. Even after her death in 1663, her legacy lived on. Nzinga became a symbol of defiance, not just in Angola, but across Africa. Her resistance to Portuguese colonization inspired future generations of African leaders and revolutionaries who would continue the fight for independence in the centuries that followed. In modern-day Angola, Queen Nzinga is revered as a national hero. Monuments have been erected in her honor, and schools have been named after her to ensure that her story is passed down to future generations. She is celebrated as a symbol of African resistance and empowerment, a leader who refused to bow to foreign domination. Nzinga's life and legacy stand as a powerful reminder of the resilience and strength of African nations in the face of colonial oppression. Her ability to navigate both the military and diplomatic challenges of her time was extraordinary, and her commitment to the well-being of her people is a model of leadership that continues to resonate today. As one of Africa's greatest queens, Nzinga Mbande's name remains a symbol of power, wisdom, and the unyielding fight for freedom. Her influence spread far beyond her time, leaving a profound impact on the broader historical narrative of colonial resistance. Queen Nzinga's defiance and intelligence ensured that her legacy would continue to inspire those who stand against oppression, making her one of the most powerful figures in the history of Africa.